This is Rockhampton with Nyree Johnson, the show about the people who hold our region together, the volunteers, the founders, the quiet achievers behind our businesses, clubs, charities and not-for-profits. Real stories told plainly from people serving Central Queensland with heart. Here's Nyree.
Today's guest is Ann Davie. Now, Ann is coming to us today to talk about the fabulous work of the Shelter Collective. The Shelter Collective is an initiative that I have followed since it was created and founded by local community people who just wanted to make a difference to women in particular and the housing situation that we have in Rockhampton. And, you know, what better opportunity than to repurpose some little cottages on the north side of Rocky to create these spaces for women to move into when they're in between places. But the Shelter Collective has been something I've wanted to showcase on this podcast for quite some time, again, because I do admire the work and the community members that have pulled it together. And I'm so very, very pleased to bring you Ann Davie today. So welcome to the show, Ann.
Thank you very much.
So before we really get stuck into it and talk a little bit about the Shelter Collective and a little bit about who Ann Davie is and all of the community hats that you wear, not just the Shelter Collective, I have a question to ask you, and that is, if you could be an expert at anything at all in the world, what would it be and why?
Gosh, I have thought about this one, and what popped in my head first is going to be something that doesn't sound like it would normally, who'd want to be an expert in that. But I would love to be an expert in how to make systems more human. So, and by that I mean, we all encounter systems that we have to work within, whether it's government ones, whether it's society ones or community ones or whatever. And systems are made up of humans. So why don't systems behave more like humans and for the benefit of humans? But I think we've all found where they've been anything but human. So that would be the thing that I'd want to be an expert in, is how to make those systems actually meet the needs of people and act more personable, I guess.
Absolutely. I really like that. I am not questioning that curiosity at all. I'm totally on board.
Yeah.
Sometimes I fear that the systems of our different layers of government and different things that we need to navigate in life, sometimes people hide behind systems and processes and, they're cumbersome and they're just hard, and they don't need to be because they're designed to help people, and that's not what they're doing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in many cases, the systems are there to kind of look after themselves rather than their stated objectives, which are usually around providing benefits to people or groups or community, whatever. But I find that more often than not, a lot of it is about preserving the system itself rather than allowing it to be malleable to meet the needs of particular groups of people. Yeah.
No, I like it. I definitely agree with that one. So, Anne, you wear a lot of hats in the community. The Shelter Collective is just one of them. Of course, we spoke briefly off the recording about the Yeppoon Lions Club, Pine Fest, Capricorn Citizens Advocacy, all organisations that I'm a big fan of. And I'm sure there's a lot more out there that you're involved in, whether it's in a formal capacity or just, go along and help out every now and then. But I'm curious to know, a life of service, you're not just sitting around relaxing, doing retirement, you're actively contributing to your community. And I'm curious to know, what are those key moments or people in your life, in your journey, that have really shaped who you are today?
I guess I have to look at my family, and I am the eldest of 4 children. I'm the only girl as well. So I think in many ways, who I am has been shaped by my family life. And I have one brother that's only 18 months younger than I am. And then there's a big gap. And there are 2 brothers who are much younger than I am, who are 11 and 12 years younger than I am. Same parents, just a break between. And I think because I was looked at as the, built-in babysitter in many cases, that I did take on that nurturing role. And I think women, not to be sexist, but I think in many cases, women are very nurturing people. But I think so that had a huge impact on me growing up. But then I guess as I got older, some of the things that I saw in in my work life have led me to really believe that I have to be involved in my community, not just through my work. Because I've worked for a lot of government agencies, so I saw how
Mm.
I was part of those systems that in many cases try to preserve itself. So I knew that I needed to do something outside of that, and that usually
Mm.
and, being involved directly with community groups. And I found that really, really rewarding. So maybe some of the things that I wasn't getting necessarily in my professional life, I found by volunteering or being involved in other community groups and things like that. So, yeah.
Absolutely can relate. Yes, when you're working somewhere and it doesn't quite fulfill every part of you, and you go searching for that
Yeah.
service, that sense of community, that contribution, and leaving the world a little bit better than the way you found it.
Yeah, and I think also, I mean, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here originally. I've been in
Mm.
Australia for 36 years, so I love Australia, and I think because even though I speak English, I do occasionally still feel like the outsider. People still ask how are you enjoying your holiday, and it's been
Oh
30.
wow.
But I think in many ways, I really wanted to find things that allowed me to be really involved in my community around me, so that I felt like I belonged here. I don't have any family here, so
Mm.
in many cases I look
Mm.
to the community for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. That must be a bit of an odd request when people ask how your holiday is 36 years later.
Yeah, yeah. I usually say to them, if they're a young person, I say I've been in Australia longer than you have. So yeah.
Yes, fantastic. So, what inspired your journey and the current path that you're on? So, you're heavily involved in the Shelter Collective, of course, and that contribution to community and that connection that gives. But why the Shelter Collective, and also why the Lions Club and Pine Fest, and we always join or associate ourselves with things that we feel connected to, or we have a bit of a passion towards. And what is that for you?
Well, I didn't start out becoming involved, wanting to become involved specifically in housing or homelessness issues, but it was something that I was involved with in my role at Rockhampton Regional Council, where I was the policy advisor. And I guess if you want to take a step before that, my interest in public policy really formed when I had worked previously for the Australian Clearinghouse for Youth Studies, and that's an organization that it's now defunded, but it had gathered information about young people,
Hmm.
data about young people, any current research, and then kind of mashed that up and presented it back to the community as information that's more accessible for the general public, but also for people who work with young people. And I was at
Hmm.
a roundtable discussion, a national roundtable discussion on young people and health and well-being issues. And the representative from the Commonwealth government at the time was saying that for her to develop a piece of policy, she just did a Google search on that particular issue. And right then and there, I thought, I don't want any people in government relying on their ability to search Google
Mm.
effectively to get the answers that they need. So for me, right then and there, I knew that I wanted to make sure that everyone knew or had available and understood the information on any particular topic. So when
Mhm.
I was at Rockhampton Regional Council, I was asked to develop council's local housing action plan. And that's where I really became involved or I started to know a little bit more about the housing system as well as the sector itself, as well as Rockhampton's response to housing and homelessness.
Mm.
And that's where I came in contact with the Shelter Collective. So, and it was at those very, very early days where sitting around the table saying, okay, well, what do we want to do? What is
Mm.
it that needs to be done? And for me, that always kind of goes back to, well, what evidence is there that says in Rockhampton, what are the particular needs? So again, drawing on some of that. A lot of people come in and want to throw, ideas around about solutions just from their particular point of view. But I
Mm.
guess I'm one who wants to know, really, really understand the issue as best as I can before I jump to any particular solution, because it may not necessarily be the right thing at the right time in the right place. So that's, I guess, a convoluted way of saying how I arrived at this. When I became involved with the Shelter Collective, however, I knew immediately that it was a group that was not talk, it was about action. So I knew that they
Yes.
were going to take those steps. They were going to find the resources, put whatever resources they had at their disposal towards finding those solutions. So that was very, very exciting for me. It wasn't sitting around a table talking about things and, navel gazing or anything like that. Or, a phrase I like that I found really good description is to admire the problem. We didn't want to admire the problem. We wanted to find the solutions around the problem. So that's how I became involved. Yeah.
Yeah, fabulous. And for those who don't know what the Shelter Collective does or is, and my introduction didn't do it justice at all, but can you explain a little bit more about that project and what
Here.
they set out to achieve, what they've actually achieved, which is very, very successful. And then, of course, moving into, is it Moby 1 it's called, or am I
This
getting that name?
Moby. Yeah, that's right.
Moby, yes.
Yeah. So
Mm,
it started out, like I said, people from the community who had an interest in finding a solution around housing affordability in particular. It included, um, it was led by Dave Grenfell,
mhm,
and there were some other contributors around the table at that time from the housing services, as well as two counselors from Rocky Council, Donna Kirkland and, oh gosh,
Grant Mathers?
Grant Mathers. Sorry, I big blank there, and I'm really sorry. Grant
All
Mathers.
good.
So we really started out saying, okay, what is it that needs to be done? And what we decided that needed to be done is we needed to have a way of very quickly and efficiently and effectively create housing. And we looked at all sorts of ideas, whether that was construction of new, whether it was looking at pods, whether it was looking at, all sorts of options. One of the things that Dave Grenfell excels at is finding those opportunities and making the most of them. And
Mm,
he, through a number of different connections, managed to find the site on Alexandra Street, which is Alexandra Gardens, which was disused cottages as part of a aged care facility. And he managed to negotiate to have those be made available to be converted into affordable housing. And then
mm,
he managed to get Anglicare as the manager of that affordable housing. And that all happened within, I don't know the exact number of months, and it was months, not years,
yes.
that these cottages were renovated through fundraising, through sponsorship, through local businesses just donating goods or, brute force to
Mm,
those cottages. And they're all housing women over 55 who were at risk of homelessness or who were homeless. So
mm,
they immediately were able to fulfill that need. Well, not immediately, over a couple of months anyway. So that's the main
very
approach.
quick.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. I mean, if you consider how long it takes to build something or to renovate something these days, or how costly it is too, Dave's been able to really call in so much help from the community and so much help from major corporations as well, and philanthropic
mm,
organizations too. But the next project that I guess I've been more involved in, I retired about a year ago, and at that point I became a director of the Shelter Collective. So there are three directors:
mm,
myself, Dave, and Michelle Coates. And we all bring
mhm,
something quite different to the table. Dave has his connections to construction and business. Michelle, as the former manager of Rosebery, has great insights into the housing and homelessness sector. And then I kind of bring, I guess, a strategic view of things, perhaps, and as well as communications too. But the next project is, you said Moby, which is Mobile Outreach Bus Initiative. And it's a converted bus that was donated by the Rothery family, a local bus company. And it's been converted and has a trailer and provides laundry facilities, showers, food, and it goes out to where people are sleeping rough. And
mhm,
that's been operational since April.
mm.
So that's a
Very new.
yeah, it's a new project. It's really taken off though. Yeah.
It would be in high demand at the moment in Rocky.
Yeah, there really isn't anything here like it. There are outreach services that do go out, but those are limited, and they
Mm,
don't necessarily provide everything that we do.
mhm,
And I guess the most important part of what we do is actually bringing those services along with us. So
mm,
We aren't the service, but we provide the platform for services to come and join us when we're out there. They can then talk to our guests and to see if they
Mhm.
need any access to any services, or just to find out a little bit more about what their situation is so that, the community can help provide
Mm.
those supports. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important too to recognize sometimes that we have initiatives that are stood up by very well intentioned people, and this is one of them, the Shelter Collective and Moby. And it's not to replace anything that anyone's doing, it's to collaborate, bring people together. The Shelter Collective, the story there, where the amount of resources, businesses, donations, community groups that pulled together to redevelop all of those cottages in order to be lived in. And then the management of that by Anglicare. So, it, Anglicare is well versed at looking after women over 55 who are at risk of homelessness or are homeless. They're also, very familiar with other situations and other support services that suit different demographics of people around Rocky. And it was never, and no one's implied this, of course, but I just want to make this point that we stand up these services and we bring these resources forward, and then the existing services that have the governance, the structure, the policies, the processes, they know how to run, a mobile bus, for example, with laundry facilities, they're there. They're able to manage it. Same with, it's not a board of people or a group of volunteers that necessarily have to decide, well, who gets to go into the cottages at the Shelter Collective. Anglicare already know who needs those
Yeah.
cottages, and the privacy of the women that go into those cottages is taken care of by Anglicare. And it's just such a fascinating system. Back to our systems question again, or our systems topic. That sort of structure fascinates me because it's so many people on their own path of what the purpose of their organisation is, but then they all come together and, bring something to life.
Exactly. And that's really what, at the heart of what we are, is we're a facilitator. So there are some things that we know how to do
Mm,
that we do really well, which is to tap into some of those resources, or and funding that may be out there that, unfortunately, somebody like Anglicare or Rosebery or some of those other organizations can't necessarily go to Ashiana Fulton Hogan and ask for some
mm,
donations, or for some sponsorship. It's just not possible. It is possible for us to do that.
mm,
It's also, we don't receive any government funding, so
mm,
we aren't necessarily restricted in what we can and can't do. We're able to move around and make sure that what we do does fit what Rockhampton needs,
mm,
rather than what's been dictated by any particular funding agreement.
mm,
And I'm not saying that funding agreements and the funding isn't serving its purpose, but there isn't so often a lot of wriggle room in being able to adapt to local situations and things like that we are able to do.
mm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's a little bit like playing Tetris. Who
Yeah,
fits
yeah,
into what
it's
what grant, and how do we spend it, and how do we make sure it aligns? And
yeah, yeah,
yes, it's a game of Tetris.
yeah.
Yeah. So, Anne, have you always been in the Rockhampton region for your 36 years, or have you been a little bit over Australia?
We've been here, oh gosh, I think we will have owned our place for about 8 years, but I've been here about 7.5 years. So
Okay.
we moved up from my husband and I moved up from Hobart, Tasmania, where my husband's originally from Hobart. We had lived there for about 19 years. Before that, in Sydney for 6 years, and before that, in Melbourne for 5 years. And before that, I was in
Mm,
Chicago. So, yeah.
hmm. Yeah. Wow. Hobart to Central Queensland is a bit of a choice.
It is, but I was determined to have warm weather during
Yes.
winter. So, yeah.
Yes. Well, you picked a good spot. We do
Yeah,
we do have fantastic weather with the exception of 3 months of the year. And in those 3 months, you just have to kind of grin and bear it for a sec, or go to the beach or
yeah,
the pool or sit in aircon.
exactly.
Yes. So being connected to community is obviously really important, and your work at the Rocky Regional Council would have enabled that as well. But, having experienced Melbourne, Hobart, Sydney, Rocky, the best of all, really, what does the Rocky region mean to you? What does community contribution mean to you?
Gosh, that's so hard. And the thing is, no matter where I am, I firmly believe in the community that's there. I know that there are
Mm,
good people in every single community who want to see the best for everyone around
mm,
them. So that's almost like a given. So, but I think one of the things that I've found here is, and compared to the United States and particularly Chicago, Australia is so laid back.
Hmm.
And I think here in Central Queensland, it's just a little bit more laid back even. I mean, everyone
Yes.
takes things quite seriously, but you also know how to have fun and you also enjoy
Yes.
what you're doing. And I think that's one of the things that one of the reasons I became involved with Lions is because I really enjoy the people that I'm there working with. Whether
Mm,
it's at fig tree markets, flipping sausages, or whether it's, working at Pinefest and trying to get the market stalls organized. I really enjoy the people that I'm with, and they all have the same view of we're doing this for the community, and we
mm,
enjoy things while we're doing this for the community. So I guess that's the thing, and that may be elsewhere, but it really that spirit really made me feel at home very quickly here.
mm. Fantastic. So, in all of your journey to date so far, so living in lots of different places and working and now being retired and involved in probably busier work than you may have ever done in your paid employment. I'm sure you worked very, very hard for your paid employment though, but retirement gives you a unique opportunity to just get your hands stuck into everything. But in life, we all have, significant challenges to overcome, or we have really, really proud moments that kind of, they're life altering moments. They change the direction that we're heading in, or they change our perspective on something. Have you had anything like that come up, in your time, either in recent years or as a child, or anything at all that comes to mind that's really shaped who you are?
I guess my answer to that is that I've always embraced change. And I always actually look for change. So,
Hmm.
for me to move from Hobart to here, that was not a big deal. For me to move from
Mm,
Chicago to Australia, that was an adventure.
mm,
So I've certainly had challenges, as everybody does growing up. I don't know whether I think the challenge that I've had to overcome is one that I'm actually a really shy person, and I do find it difficult occasionally, even still, but I do find it difficult to step out of my comfort zone.
mm,
I'm quite happy just playing around with numbers, or reading or analyzing things. And that's all in my head.
mm,
So for me, a challenge is
mm,
I have to step out of there and actually have to work with people or be the face of something. That's really hard for me. So that's a challenge for me. But then, I figure I've got to try.
mm,
I don't know any other way other than to try and see if it's something that works for me. So
mm.
I don't have any particular thing other than my innate shyness has always been an issue. So yeah.
I would not have picked that. I would not have picked that at all. Especially, it can be quite challenging and daunting for people to say yes to being on this podcast. And because, you're on camera, you are going to hear yourself speak if you listen to it, or maybe watch yourself on YouTube. And that can be quite a daunting experience for people who are either shy or introverted. I've noticed it's come up quite a bit.
Yeah, I remember a story my mother told when I was in second grade. And my mother was very protective of me because I was quite small. I was the littlest kid in the class and very quiet. And she marched into my second grade teacher's office and said, "What is this about Anne being in remedial reading?" Yeah, I mean, I was reading at like a grade 5 level, and she goes, "Well, she doesn't talk. She doesn't say anything." It's like, well, just because she doesn't say anything doesn't mean she's not thinking and she's not doing things.
Mm.
And I think from that moment on, they just let me do my thing. So
Yeah, nice.
I had my own projects and all that, so I didn't have to, get up in front of the class and read whatever. But yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
No, you gotta love mums, hey. They
yeah,
they step in, they know when to pounce. So, being retired now, of course, which is must be amazing because it would give you so much more time and available headspace to work on all of the community projects that you're involved in. Sometimes, with the best of intentions, things don't go our way.
sure.
And, sometimes it can be hard, especially in community work where your heart's in it for the right reasons. There's no promotion at the end of it. There's no pay. There's no salary increase. It's all for the community, and sometimes we have those setbacks. But what keeps you moving forward every day? What keeps you getting up and going, I'm still going to keep chipping away at this. This matters.
Because I've seen time and time again, even if something doesn't work, it might be the next step to something that does. So,
Mm,
and you always learn something from that experience as well. And I know, particularly when you're dealing with issues that are very complex, there isn't one answer for something. There
mm,
isn't one answer for homelessness. There isn't one answer for Rockhampton's, how to address Rockhampton's particular issues. There are a lot
mm,
of things that have to come together that need to kind of work together. So maybe your little piece of the puzzle didn't work just right then and right now in that way, but there might have been some really good things that did come out of it, like bringing people together. So even
mm,
if something didn't work, there's got to be some benefit that comes from just from the experience. So yeah,
just from trying.
yeah,
Absolutely. And you never know as well who you might be inspiring or who might be watching you. There might be other people around that are being inspired by the work that you do, and they may know you and be connected to you, but you might not realize how much of an impact you're having on them just by showing up.
and just by showing up, exactly right. For something like Moby, we have to just show up, whether
Mm,
no one comes that day. We have to be there. People have to count on us, or
mm,
so we count on ourselves. So we
mhm,
try everything that we can to make sure that we're there.
mm,
And I think that consistency and that commitment really shows in the amount of trust that we've gained from a lot of the people who use our supports and services there. We've
mm,
got repeat customers, so we must be doing something right if they're coming back and they trust us
mm,
and they know that there's no judgment, there's no pressure.
mhm,
They spend an hour with us talking, just sitting, having a cup of coffee, doing a load of laundry, all those really, really normal things.
mm.
You know, just being there is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And is Moby staffed by volunteers, or is there some sort of grant funding somewhere that's paying people?
No, well, we have managed to have just starting right, in the last week or two, um,
Mm,
coordinator who.
okay.
But up until now, everything has been really driven by volunteers and
Mm,
sponsors and the people who help supply things. We have a new coordinator and she's there now to, I guess, manage all the things that you have to go into making Moby work. And when you're dealing with volunteers, you work to their schedules. So
mm,
when they're available. And we do have some people that have very specialized abilities and skills, such as bus
mm,
drivers. You're not going to put me behind a bus, or
mm,
driving a bus. So we do need to rely on the availability of volunteers. Work with a lot of community organizations to also help us, such as and schools like Rockhampton Girls Grammars. Provide some of the food. So
mhm,
we help coordinate that, get them the foods, they make the things, and then we pick them up. But I guess everything that goes into Moby at the moment is really from volunteers donating their time.
mm.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And if somebody listening to this podcast did want to get involved and become a volunteer with Moby, what sort of criteria is involved in that, and what do they need to do?
Right. Well, first of all, you do have to have a blue card because we are working with
Hmm.
vulnerable members of our community. So that's a must have. You don't need to have worked with anybody in a support role or anything like that. We've got volunteers who are young and old, so age is no limit either. But you do have to provide that commitment. So,
Mm,
like I said, we have to show up there on our schedule. It's
mm,
so critical. So we do need to have volunteers who are willing to be there at 7 o'clock in the morning to help set up and to then get things running and then be there until about 11 o'clock. We
mhm,
2 days a week at the moment, but that's just as we're getting things established. We don't really know what the future's going to hold, but it may be busier than that. So the ability to volunteer a couple of times a month
mm.
the roles aren't demanding. There may be some physical things involved, such as setting up equipment, but likewise, that's not, if you're not capable, we still want volunteers to come along,
Mm,
because a lot of it is around talking and just assisting the people who come to use our services. Help them with a load of laundry, give them their toiletries as they're going to have a shower, that sort of
mhm.
thing.
Because Moby has a shower, doesn't it?
Yeah, there are 2 showers,
Yes.
2 ensuite
Mm,
showers, and 2 washers and 2 dryers, as well as
mhm,
a full, kitchen inside and a barbecue outside.
mm,
And we have Wi-Fi, so it's really there to help people with the day-to-day things that they need,
mm.
that we all take for granted. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Mm.
But if they wanna
And
get a hold of if volunteers wanna get a hold of us, they can go to the Shelter Collective website.
mhm,
There's some information about Moby there, or they can drop a line on our Facebook page. There's a Moby CQ Facebook page, and the details are there. Yeah.
fantastic. So 2 days a week at the moment, hoping for more, I'm guessing. And with the schedule and where you go, is that like a private and confidential
No, not at all.
route, or is it
No,
fairly consistent? Mm,
it's at the moment it's consistent.
mm,
We there are some things that we have to have. We have to have access to water. While we have generators, we'd like to also like sites that do have provide power, if at all possible. But our 2 sites at the moment are in Kershaw Gardens at the Dowling
mhm,
Street entrance, and we're
mhm,
there on Mondays. And on Thursdays, we're on Key Street at Tanuba Park, just outside the CBD.
okay,
That location may vary, but I guess check out the Moby Facebook page for updates about that. But definitely on Mondays, we're in Kershaw Gardens. We want to go to where places where we know it's easily accessible by people who are sleeping rough. So
mhm.
that's really the criteria. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Well, I do encourage anyone who's looking for a way to give back to their community to consider volunteering for Moby a couple of times a month and being part of that team that brings these services to people who are sleeping rough. It is so important, especially in this current day, in the Rocky region in particular.
Yeah.
What what advice, considering all of your, your worldwide travels, Australia travels, work, career, community service, if you could give one piece of advice to the next generation coming along after you and I, what would it be?
My gosh. I have children, and I don't know that I've ever given them advice. So I guess we we really feel, and I feel it too, that occasionally we're very time poor. I'm sure that in many instances there is time to donate or to give to your community in perhaps small ways, but also the rewards are so much. As trite as it is, I get so much back than you can give.
Mm,
Absolutely love going out on the crack of dawn on Moby, because I know the day is going to be so worthwhile. I guess the advice would be to that don't necessarily look at what you're outlaying as how much, keep in mind that you're going to be getting a lot back too. And it's very enjoyable. So I guess my advice is find even just small ways of contributing. Yeah.
yeah, I love that. Thank you. Well, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast today, Anne. Thank you so much for making time to join me and talk all things Shelter Collective and Moby. And thank you so much for everything that you do for the Central Queensland community.
Thank you very much for your time. And I've enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's another episode of Rockhampton with Nyree Johnson. If this story stayed with you, follow the show on Spotify and YouTube so the next one finds you. And if you know someone in our region quietly doing good, someone who belongs in this chair, get in touch through www.nyreejohnson.com.au. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.